Welcome, Shannon Lucas. How are you?
I'm so good and so excited to be here, Liliana. Thanks for having me.
Well, we're excited to have you. Are you ready to pour into our listeners?
I'm so ready.
All right. So tell us about your leadership journey and what you're doing now.
Yeah, I've had a number of conversations around this since I got the question, and I think it's a really important question. And I can say I didn't set out to be a leader, so I was sort of an accidental leader at the beginning. And over the journey, I've really become an intentional leader. The first time that I had sort of an official leadership role was with a matrix team. I hadn't been set up with the skills or tools to be an effective leader. And so it's that cringy moment where it's like, oh, it was like authoritarian, it was non empathy based. I just feel bad about the way that I showed up. The next sort of leadership moment for me was when I got to help build out the innovation program at Vodafone. And along the way, one of the beautiful gifts that I learned was the power of co leadership. And so I called him my work husband at the end of it. But my work husband, Chris, and I really represented two facets of what the innovation program needed to be successful. We called it the think and do tank, where we were working with customers and thinking and then building things. And so we developed this really beautiful, co creative, collaborative, open leadership model that we were using to run the sort of global innovation program. But it was also great because it was modeling the type of leadership and the way that the people who are participating, that we called innovation champions around the world, really needed to show up so that they could drive change and lead change in their organizations. And so that was when I first also really started thinking about the meta impact of how you show up as a leader, what you're modeling, and the ripple effect that that has across the organization. By the time I got to Ericsson in my EVP role, that was the first sort of true ownership when I had the P&L, right? And so that's a completely different type of ownership in terms of like the buck stops with you, and that's like super, super clear. That's unambiguous. What was interesting there, and so my journey, as you can probably hear, has been a lot of being the change agent, being the catalyst for change. And so that's why I was brought in there. I was EVP of emerging business. What the business was looking for me to do was to open up new markets and explore new business models. But of course, that was really disruptive to my peers. And so this is another thing, thinking about leadership is like, how is the work that you're doing and how you're showing up impacting your peers? If I was successful, it meant that it was going to be disruptive to the older business models, the older sales paths, et cetera. And as a leader, I didn't have a safe place where I could go talk those things through. So I think, just the recognition that being a leader can be really lonely. But the challenge of being a change leader is often you come in as the shiny object, but you might exit the building as sort of the virus, right? Everyone
Oh,
thinks they want what you have. And when you start to do that, there's this sort of immune response system. And so that can be really hard as a leader to navigate. So, like I said, I think the journey becomes for me some of the most important parts. It's not the title, but it's how you're embodying leadership and the impact that that has on those around you.
well, that was beautifully said, and I love the flow. You started with being thrown into leadership, which a lot of new leaders are. And when we don't support or provide training for them, we do them a disservice. But at the same time, you learn so much about how not to be. You learn so much about your way of being impacts those around you. And then you went on to partnering with someone, co leading with someone, which taught you so much about connecting, communicating, and impacting in that way. And I love how you didn't just take on a role, as you continue to grow, you asked yourself some questions and how am I impacting those around me? It's not just me doing my shit, right? Because I'm a get shit done kind of person, as I'm
Yeah.
assuming you are.
Yes.
Give
You'll
me a
love the
task.
book. Yes.
Yeah, you give me a task how to get from A to B. I'm like, I'm on it. But that important question, how does my leadership impact those around me, is a higher level question. And it is a very important question. You go on to talk about change leadership, which brings you to what you're doing now. And you mentioned the beautiful word catalyst.
Thank you.
So tell us
Yep.
about your work and how it can support those leaders.
So the other thread throughout all of those leadership points that I had is the increasing self-awareness, which is part of where you were so beautifully landing, about what made me different as a leader, for better and worse. And at one point when I was working at Vodafone, I was starting to burn out, and I hired an executive coach to help me navigate that. And long story short, that's now my co-CEO. And she had been doing this foundational research about the executives that she loved working with. And we call those people catalysts. So catalysts is a way of being. It's not really an option. You can choose to be a change agent, but catalyst is like who you are in the world. Again, for better or worse. It's about connecting all of the dots that you're seeing emerging, distilling it down into this distinct vision of something that has to change in front of you, right? It's not theoretical. It's like this burning, almost physical need to make the system in front of you better. Could be at home, could be in the family, could be volunteering, wherever. And then really fast, and this is the get shit done part, is like moving into action. Sometimes before we've been able to clearly articulate where we're headed, which means as a leader, we've already left people behind. As we move into action, we're collecting data, again, sometimes sort of like subliminally, and then we're taking what we've learned, we're iterating the vision, and then we'll go through that circle again and again, and we call that the catalyst formula. When you don't have the self-awareness, which I didn't, and sometimes because it's our default pattern, even when intellectually you know that you're a catalyst, but you're in a leadership environment, you can do that swirl so fast that you actually increase friction in the system instead of decrease friction. So in my last role at Ericsson, what I realized was I needed a translator team. I needed a VP of operations, I needed a chief of staff, and I needed an EA to put the structures and the translations in place so that I didn't leave people behind. This all informs the work that we do now. So we're super committed to research. Tracy's a researcher and ethnographer. We host an executive community where we're constantly doing co-peer learning, and of course the learning that we do with our customers as we're helping leaders, whether they're catalysts or not, but there's a huge overlap in terms of the skills that you need to effectively lead through change now. And of course, before the pandemic, we had to convince everyone that it was a VUCA world, that there was this volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. I think we don't have to have that conversation anymore, but we do have to say we weren't historically training leaders to deal with this level of fear and uncertainty and all of the things. So how do we do that now to make them more effective leaders?
Very important work, especially now. So it's funny because when I think of catalyst, most of us think of catalyst moments. We don't think of us being catalysts. So this is a shift, which is very intentional and I think so needed in the world now. So your organization, Catalyst Constellations, how did you come up with this name? I know there's always a story. Tell us about that and also how we can connect with you.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, so as Tracy was doing the research, the name Catalyst wasn't easy. It was like, how do we define these people? Are they change agents, change makers, instigators, fire starters? And so in one of her conversations with one of her customers, he described himself as a catalyst. And she was like, that's the word that describes these people. I historically have named everything in my life related to space. I'm obsessed with space exploration and all of that. So my son's name is Galileo, as an example. My cat's name is Sagan after Carl Sagan. And so when we were thinking through the names, but also the work that we wanted to do, we knew that catalysts can't exist in isolation. When they exist in isolation, burnout is real, they're not effective. And so what the work we had already been doing was really curating these constellations, these networks of catalysts. So when we sat down to name the company, those two things came together. They can find us online at our website, catalystconstellations.com. And of course, I'd love for people to reach out to me on LinkedIn.
Beautiful. So if we're looking to be catalysts in this world, or even if we don't see ourselves as that, it's important to lean in because this is important work. Now, you did co-author a book and I love the title. Tell us about it and how can we get it?
The name of the book is Move Fast, Break Shit, Burn Out, The Catalyst Guide to Working Well. People think that that's what we're advocating for in the title, and it's actually not. Move fast, break shit, burn out is the default way of catalysts moving through the world, especially when they lack the self-awareness that they're different, that they move at a different speed, and that they have a different relationship with change. So the book is really the personal love letter. It's the personal operating manual. It is meant to be, in a way, the antidote to the move fast, break shit, burnout, the catalyst guide to working well, which is like, how do you slow down just enough your speed? How do you break stuff with intentionality instead of sort of just at random, which will ultimately minimize the amount of burnout? And we say to catalysts because often they won't slow down for themselves. A burnt out catalyst creates no change at all. This isn't fluffy self-care. This is in service of the thing that you want to change in the world. These are the things that you need to do. And it's on Amazon and in libraries and wherever you get your books.
Certainly a catchy title. And what caught me was the burnout, because I've been through this. I've been through burnout. It is not fun. And we can talk about self-care because to me, it is vital to leadership. You can't lead without leading yourself well. And it's not so much fluffy to me. It is a necessity, right? Because burnout is not fun. All right. So change is inevitable, but growth is optional, right? John Maxwell talks about that. And sometimes these changes or crisis can really be that catalyst moment. So with that said, what has been your best crisis and why?
Honestly, my best crisis, if there's such a thing, and this is probably it, was the burning out at Vodafone. And I guess like going a click deeper, I loved the work. This wasn't a question of like, I was so deeply aligned with my personal purpose and mission in the world. I loved working at Vodafone. The catalyst challenge is often, though, that we can see 10 times more change, more impact that we could be having. We were having great impact. I mean, the Innovation Champion program was global. It was thriving. We were driving tens of millions in year revenue. The employees who participated were more likely to stay. And you're like, that sounds great. But I could always see more that we could be doing. And that was the problem that I was sort of troubleshooting that led to burnout. A friend of mine suggested getting an executive coach. And I was sort of like, I have nothing left to lose. So like, as a single mom, it's a big investment. But I was like, okay, I'm going to do that. That executive coach was Tracy Lovejoy. She is my co-CEO now and co-author of the book. And so, she helped me do the work to really create, I would say, an intentional life. And to your point, if you're not holding yourself in a container, it's not even just being sustainable at work. Like you have to have enough resilience in your life, enough resourcefulness in your life to be able to be effective in all things. And so she really helped me see that and design my life intentionally. And then, of course, she helped me understand what it meant to be a catalyst. And, you know, when people look at the book, they'll see that there's like a spray painted tag of a lightning bolt. And it's because that's how people feel who are catalysts when they get this sort of diagnosis or definition, if you will. It's like, oh my God, that explains my entire life going back to starting the recycling program in high school. And so it becomes this like massive pivot point in your life. And so the burnout, all of that, and then the antidote of having Tracy, plus the sort of like understanding of what it meant to be a catalyst has changed my life for the better in just about every way.
Powerful. I know that catalysts or people who think like you do always see things from a macro level. The difference here is, I guess, when we're immature and not self-aware, we start to see it and want to put it in place. And it's the moving fast, right? But then we drop, I don't know if it's drop down a level or spiral up.
Totally.
I don't know. So when we spiral up a level in self-awareness, then we see the impact that that has on people around us. It's the same thing with trauma, right? If we ignore our issues and our trauma and we don't really heal, we become leaders who hurt other people.
Yes.
Without being conscious of it. And we see that all around us, which is why I always lean into that self-awareness piece, that self-care piece, that healing piece that we have to go through. And that's a responsibility that all leaders should take. And so
can I comment on that? Because it's such a good point. And so I had another sort of like shift moment, which was when Tracy and I decided to do our business full time. We had been doing it part-time to see if there was a there. But as anyone who's an entrepreneur or going through a big life shift like that knows, it's a massive shift. And particularly in the entrepreneurship world, because not only are you spending all of your waking time and all of your working hours, but your financial dependence becomes really intertwined. And nothing gets to the like neuroses from our childhood, like money and value and sense of self-worth and all of that, right? So it's another really big shift. So we ended up hiring a business coach who specialized in partnerships like that, but she was a trained clinical psychologist as well as having an MBA and being a business expert. And this was like the month before the pandemic. And it's some of the hardest work that Tracy and I have done. But so many of the like traumas from childhood and all of that stuff came up. And if you don't make them explicit and work through them and put them on the table, to your point, they're just going to be the things that will erode the business, erode the trust and all of that. So I so completely agree. And so few people feel like we're going to bring a clinical psychologist into work to talk about how we're going to work together. It's like, yeah, we are.
A powerful move. This is the work of my soul, helping leaders to really drop in and see how they can heal. And it's what you said, design an intentional life. Then we can make those changes and shift the energy in the room, which is so necessary now. So thank you so much, Shannon. All right. So as someone committed to continuous learning, Shannon, what are you learning right now?
This is so important. Like, I take the continual learning, the commitment to that very seriously. And if I'm expecting leaders to evolve, then I need to be walking that talk too.
That's right.
And we can talk about this at multiple levels. So like from a business perspective, we are constantly doing research on transformation and change. We do this in a variety of ways. We do sort of just interviews across our ecosystem. We're part of this broader executive community mastermind network where people will ask us to do specific research and learning for them. But I think it's important also to stay on top of like what the biggest trends are and the things that are having the biggest impact to business writ large. So as an example, last year, I'm helping leaders navigate a lot of the fear and uncertainty around AI. And while I have a technical background and have been working with earlier iterations of AI, I was like, I need to get my finger on the pulse right now so that I can lead from a solid ground with these leaders. And so I did an MIT certificate in AI and business and strategy as an example. What Tracy and I are doing now is we're seeing all of the way that people thought about transformation and change management before with all of these different, very like almost waterfall like methodologies don't work anymore, but we're going back and getting some of the actually older credentials so that we can tie the connections to the things that we're learning about what's emerging in change and transformation leadership right now. Going back to the note that we ended on though, like I am still doing my own personal discovery. I actually started doing psychoanalysis last year and have been in some groups that are just really committed to doing the personal work as well.
I love that. And, you know, there are three questions that we as leaders need to really focus on. And this is what we really want to know of those people who lead us is, do you care about me? Can I trust you? And can you help me? And those three questions are foundational. And so for me to also be in a position where I can serve other people, I need to serve myself. In other words, I need to do all the work that I need to continue to do because I'm expanding all the time. You never arrive. So I love that. Something else came up, developing future leaders. How do you equip the next generation?
Well, I just have to say off the top, my son's generation and watching how they're showing up in the workforce gives me a lot of hope. So at least in his circle, they're living top to bottom their values from what they're buying and wearing to how they're showing up in the workforce and how they're starting to lead. So that's exciting. As we work with organizations and we work up and down and across every different level of an organization to help them navigate change and transformation, you have to start with the thing that you were just talking about. The things that were normally taught as soft skills, I would say now are the power skills. And I would say we have them in our design world as like the foundational skills, because the technical skills are going to change so fast or become irrelevant. And by technical, I mean domain expertise as well as like actual technology. So we go in and we start with like, what is emotional intelligence? And the upper left quadrant of emotional intelligence is self-awareness. How do you cultivate self-awareness so that you can self-regulate, so that you can develop social awareness, so that you can do relationship management? Like that is the foundation. And then there's the skills on top of that that are like, how do you lead through this ambiguity and uncertainty? And this is where we come full circle to, we are constantly keeping our finger on the pulse of what the needs of the moment are in terms of training as well. So like in the last 18 months, we've heard more and more about being able to manage through intelligent conflict because nobody has the answer anymore. And the answer that you had 6 months ago isn't the answer for today. Part of that is psychological safety so that people can raise their hands and say, I don't think that's the solution anymore. But then it's like, how do you have the constructive, abrasive, but still productive conversation to get to what is actually the direction that the organization needs to handle? So it's not like there's a one size fits all for where you're taking leaders, but I think if you're not a priori starting on that foundational level around a lot of the emotional intelligence and self-regulation things and the ability to bring others along on the journey with you, you're not going to get very far very fast.
Observation is super important. And sometimes when we've done so much work on ourselves, we can dump things on people thinking
Right.
that they'll get
Right.
it, right? They're just surviving in certain areas.
Totally.
You spoke about the hope. So when you think about leadership today, what are some concerns that you have?
Obviously, there's a lot of things going on at the macro strategy, but what concerns me most isn't for leaders like the strategy or the technology, even. It's are we equipping leaders to mobilize organizations through the fear and to be able to lead throughout this constant uncertainty? And I bring up fear really intentionally because it's a word that I'm increasingly hearing on a daily basis in terms of what leaders are being put in the position of having to navigate through. There's existential level fears now. We all had to deal with mental health out of the pandemic, but we were all experiencing mental health in roughly similar terms, right? Fear is another level. And so that's one of the sort of biggest challenges or fears that I have is like, how are leaders going to do that? And connected with that is the impact of AI and what it means to be human in the business world and how organizations are responding to the concept of humanness. And then for me, the antidote to all of that is really bringing in joy and love as leaders.
Oh my God. Say more. I love that.
Well, I loved what you said about like the caring, the trusting, and the helping, but I would also include love in that. It's a container that, at least for me, becomes its own energy source in a way. So even when I'm depleted, underneath empathy and caring and trust and helping is this the concept of love. And I get a lot of energy back when I put that out into the world. We actually changed one of our company's values to be joy this fall. There's so much fear and darkness in so many different places. And when we design an intentional life as leaders, when we design an intentional culture, we have to think deeply about what it is we want to show up to every day. What do we want to embody? What do we want to cultivate? So we actually, on our weekly morning sync, each person on the team takes the opportunity to lead an exercise in joy, just reconnecting us with it for like 5 minutes, which is such a great way to start off the week when it's so easy to come back from the weekend for so many people and be like, oh, I've got the Monday blues or whatever. And we want to flip that and be like, let's focus on cultivating joy together.
I think that's such a powerful move, especially now, because it does shift the energy, right? You have this chaotic, negative energy. You open social media, it's always on there. And all of that has an impact on people. And I love how you're thinking at that macro level about, I don't have to have all the answers, and I don't. But you're thinking about shifting the energy in the room in situations is, I think, one of the most important things that we can do as leaders. And it goes back to that thread where you ask yourself, how do I impact my peers? And
Yeah.
as leaders, we need to be thinking about that. It's not about, saying the perfect thing. It's not about having the perfect strategies. And all of those are great. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect. However, that love and that joy, that energy changes everything. And we need it now more than ever. On the heels of the pandemic, you have the younger generation coming up out of that, where we were social distancing, which was a horrible term. Then we're coming into this era where we've never been here before.
That's right.
I mean,
That's right.
we've been close, but we've never experienced this before. And so as adults, you and I, we've worked on each other and we still feel the angst.
That's
So
right.
imagining how others who haven't had that opportunity yet, and how can we hold that container? So beautiful work. Oh my gosh, I get chills.
Thank you.
All right. So we do have a surprise question from a former guest. Are you ready?
Great.
All right. So Dr. Quadjo wants to know, what is the language you use to overcome failure and move forward?
There's two pieces to that very important question. And the first one really is around celebrating the risk taking, particularly at Ericsson, like my last corporate role. I actually institutionalized on our monthly, org-wide meetings, having a failure celebration, and
Oh,
people would nominate, et cetera, because normalizing it and actually celebrating it, it isn't just like the shame thing. There were rewards related to this so that people would start putting things forward and want to be part of that. But it's not just celebrating failure for failure's sake. So the second important piece of language is the learning. So what did we learn from this? Right? And I hear more organizations pivoting from like the fail fast to the fast learning, which I think is also nice. I don't mind either. I don't have a strong opinion, but I think it's saying it's the yes and. So what did we learn from this that's going to inform our work moving forward? Because the worst thing we could do is keep making the same mistake over and over again because
right.
we didn't get the learnings from it. Sorry, one more point connecting this to leadership. So we had a panel of 3 or 4 SVPs up there talking about their failure resumes so
Oh,
that the whole organization could see how some of their failures actually got them to the roles that they're in today. But it's with that framing of, and here's what I learned from it, and I never wanted to make that mistake again.
that is
It was
powerful.
powerful.
It sets the stage for people to just be authentic and real. And, I've made mistakes. I read something somewhere that really hit home, and I've never thought about this. But we've become a culture of perfectionists or people who value perfection. And that's such a disservice. I've done that too, right? Our school system teaches that as well,
100%.
right? So it
Yeah.
starts when we're very young. And here I thought, wait, so Source created us and we weren't perfect even then. Cro-Magnon is far from perfection. And then we had to grow, right? We evolved. And so that's the whole purpose of this life, is to grow
Yes.
and evolve and to expand. So I love this. I love how you're celebrating mistakes and also digging deep into what do we learn from it and how can we get better? What did we do well? What didn't we do well and what can we do differently?
Yeah.
Love that. Now, as a listener of this podcast, Shannon, what's a question that you would like a future leadership guest to respond to? Like, what are you curious about?
I'm going to go back to the fear because this is like what's so top of mind for me, but I would love to understand how they are helping their leaders and people talk about and deal with and move through the fear.
I'd like to touch on this a little bit because one of the things that I think last year I worked a lot on is master fear, like master the verb. So, what does that mean? For me, what I learned is that fear is a human emotion. Most of us look at it as negative, but it can be an ally and it can be a teacher if we lean into it. Not all the time. Like, I won't go swimming with sharks. It's just like it. But it does cause me to stop and think about, why am I fearful of this? And then it helps me to go deeper into things that I can tap into and perhaps change and shift. One of the things that you said that helped you to grow was having a coach. And to me, having a coach is very important to growth. Not that I need people to grow. However, it's just wise. And to have an inner circle, like there are people that know me, love me, and won't bullshit me. And I can call at times when I'm fearful. I can call at times when I'm feeling, down and not expansive. And that's okay because this is what we do in life, right? As long as we're going up
Right.
to the right. So I love this question. How are you helping your leaders talk about and move through fear?
Yep, that's it. And I would just add to this whole conversation, there's a woman who's also a change researcher, Melanie Franklin, and she's really good at bringing this up all the time, which is the neurobiology of change. And so, like, if we go back to how we evolved as humans, change was largely fearful. We had food, we had our community, blah, blah, blah. Something new entered, it was right to be afraid. We have changed so constantly now, but also the magnitude and frequency is increasing. There are neurobiological impacts to us. We all go on the change curve, the sort of grief curve, if you will. And this is the connection to love and joy. As leaders, if we are not designing experiences that get the neurochemicals to the dopamines, the endorphins, the things that bring us, that connect us to love and joy and positive feelings, it's going to be really hard for people to move through that change curve with us. So we do have a responsibility to be thinking about both the neurobiology, but also the systems design that we have in our control that we can help people move through it.
These conversations are important. I don't think we've ever had a time in leadership where that matters more than now.
100%. And it's so much. And so like the question is like, this comes back full circle to how are you putting your own oxygen mask on? Because we are asking more. I was not set up to be a great leader in that matrixed environment. And so I failed, right? So how are we setting up our leaders today to be successful, given the full recognition that the game is completely changed from a leadership perspective? The skills that are the most important now are essential before, but they're critical now. And I just think as organizations, I see the shift, but I don't know that it's shifting fast enough. And so it comes back to us as leaders. How are we putting on our own oxygen mask? What are we learning to help ourselves on our own leadership journeys, et cetera, so that we can show up as our best possible leadership selves to support those around us?
And it's conversations like this. This is why I do the work that I do. So thank you so much. Now, is there anything else you'd like to share with our audience before we wrap up?
I would just say self-compassion is really important right now. For everything that we just described, you're not going to be perfect at it. Too much is going to be expected of you. There's always going to be more work than you can possibly do. And so however you can cultivate self-compassion for yourself, which then becomes the springboard to empathy for those around you, I think that's critical now more than ever.
And connect with people that are like-minded, right?
100%. It super helps. Yes.
So with that said, tell us again where we can connect with you.
Yeah, I would love for people to reach out on LinkedIn. I think we can put that in the show notes. And our website is catalystconstellations.com, and you can learn more about the work we do there.
Shannon, thank you so much for adding value to me and to our listeners. It's been a great conversation.
This was a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much for having me.